So in the forms module, we talked about the importance of designing good forms to ensure that whatever you're doing is going to be as easy as possible for users who work with the individual records in the application. And any item, an item that's really just as important is the visual appearance of when users need to work with multiple records. This could be really any view that the user needs to access specific entities inside the application. This might be looking at creating charts to effectively summarize data, such as looking at like a sales pipeline report for all open opportunities in the system. Another area that can really help you kind of streamline what your users are working with is to create dashboards. And those dashboards will display different areas inside the application inside a singular view. So maybe you have like a sales dashboard that your account executives can use to access all of their activities and accounts and open leads inside the application. So Dynamics 365 gives you a lot of different options for working with multiple sets of data and multiple records at the same time within the application itself. And so in this module, we're going to talk a little bit about just the view concept in Dynamics 365. What are the views that are available? What are the ones that ship out of the box? And what are some of the options that you have for creating and customizing your own views inside Dynamics 365? We're also going to look at charts and talk a little bit about the different types of charts that are available and what are the differences between things like system charts and personal charts, and how does some of the grouping work together within those charts to be able to create those visualizations inside the application. We'll look at things like dashboards and how you can create different standard dashboards and bring different elements into those dashboards based upon what you want to do, as well as explore Dynamics 365's theming features. So if you wanted to go in and look at, adding some brand visualization to that, maybe modifying the application color scheme to match more in line with what you're doing, those would be some of the different things that you might see through the theming feature. So we just want to introduce you to all the different views and visualization options that are available within Dynamics 365. There's a few different types of views that are available within Dynamics 365, and it basically boils down to three. There's what are called system views, public views, and personal views. Now, depending upon the situation and who you're talking to, you might hear system views and public views kind of used interchangeably. They're really not the same thing. The system views are usually very targeted to a specific piece of functionality inside the application. Those are going to be things like your quick find view and your advanced find view. These are lookup views, those types of things. These are functionality that the application provides and that you want to be able to customize those views to support that specific level of functionality. Now, all of the system views can be customized, but because they're there as part of the application itself and they really provide more system level functionality, you don't necessarily have the ability to delete them inside the application. A public view is truly that. A public view is a view that somebody is going to create that is going to be available for any user who has access to that entity inside the application itself. Now, there's a lot of times when you create a new entity that a lot of public views will get created. So these are going to be things like, my active accounts, my open opportunities. Those are public views. You'll sometimes hear them referred to as system views, but they're not necessarily system views. Your system views are going to be like your advanced find, quick find. Your public views are going to be more of views that are going to be available to everybody in the application. Now, a personal view is very similar to a public view in the respect that it's associated with a specific entity and in a specific column set of information. But the difference with a personal view is that's created by individual users, and then those users often go out and share that view with other users or teams inside the application. They're not created for public consumption, they're created for personal, and then they could be shared out with other people if need be. So let's first talk about the system views. So really the key views that you're going to see from a system perspective is going to be the advanced find view. So when somebody goes in and creates an advanced find and does an advanced find in the system, the advanced find view is what they use if there is no view that was selected as a starting point. So if you think about how you go in and create an advanced find, you can specify the view that you want to use for kind of pre-filtering. If you don't pick a view for pre-filtering, then this advanced find view associated with this entity is ultimately what's going to be used. There's the associated view. So the associated view is when you want to look at this information as a related record when accessed through the navigation bar from another option. So for example, if I'm on the account record and I want to look at all the contacts associated with that account, I'm going to use the associated view. That's the view that when you're looking at an entity within the context of another entity, that's going to be shown from that standpoint. There's also what's called a list member view. This is really only for marketing list members for accounts, contacts, and leads, because those are the only options that really support marketing list capabilities. Another option that you have is your quick find view. So if you've ever gone into that little bar that kind of runs across the top and you type in kind of the first couple letters of the items that you're searching for, and then it goes out and searches across that view or multiple entities, you're using the quick find view to be able to facilitate that. Now the quick find view is a little bit different than other views from an application standpoint in the fact that this also has some pre-filtering options. Not only does this have some view columns that you have to define within the view itself, but this also has some find columns. So you have to specify what specific columns inside the view it is that you're looking for that information in. So when I, for example, type in, Derek, is it going to be looking for Derek in the, contact first name, the contact full name? Is there happens to be a city out there that's named Derek? Where is it going to be looking for? So you have to specify through the find columns each column that it needs to be searched with. The nice thing about these quick find views is as you add fields, and we'll show you this in the demo as well, as you add these find columns, it actually creates SQL indexes for every column that is added to a quick find, and that is actually maintained inside the application. So you can have up to 20 of these quick find columns added to the application that will have indexes created, as long as the text field in those items does not have more than 900 characters. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the demo itself. And then the other system view that you have is your lookup view. And so if you've ever gone in and you click on the magnifying glass and it looks up a specific account or a contact, that's what you're using there is the lookup view. So this is what's going to allow you to determine when you're looking up a specific record, what specific columns and filtering information you want to use to display that inside the application for that option. So the quick find, the advanced find, the lookup views, there's always going to be basically one of these per entity, and you customize those as needed to fit your specific needs. So let's look at some of these system view concepts inside the application. Now, again, what's important to remember when you create a new entity, the views and all of that information get created automatically at the time when that entity is created. So remember, there's no fields in that entity at that point. So the views that you have are at very least very, very minimal in regards to what they have. So as you start adding these fields and you start customizing the forms, you also need to make sure that for every entity that you create, that you do go in and you customize these individual views. So for example, I was gonna maybe look at the lookup view. So anytime I want to look up a loan application from the context of another item, I would go in and I would double click on the lookup view. I would then go ahead and it's going to list all the individual columns that are associated with this. And typically, again, the only thing it's really going to have at that point is the name and the created on, because those were all that was available when it was working through. So when I was going to maybe look up a loan application from another area, I'd probably want to see maybe the actual loan application name. Maybe I would like to see the applicant itself, and maybe I would also like to see the application date as well as the owner of the loan application. So now I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and actually maybe the loan type too. So now I'll click on OK, and that'll add each one of these items to my view. Now again, if we remember back to when we created these fields, these columns are actually using the display name that is defined for the field itself. So what you're seeing in here, we cannot change unless we go back in and actually define the display name inside the application. So I'm going to just maximize this to make it a little bit easier to see. So now I can move these around and kind of customize these a little bit. So for example, the name field. This is probably a little longer than I would actually need inside a view. So when I click on this, it gives me kind of my green box around it. If I come over to here where it says change properties, I can click on change properties and I can adjust this. Now there's really, it's all based upon pixels here. So you have to kind of define how long this should be based upon those options. Usually for like a name field, 200 pixels is usually a pretty good option. I've decided that I don't want the created on field, so I'm going to select the created on field, and there's an option in here that says remove, and that will allow me to remove this column from the view. So now I'm going to go in here and I say, okay, I've got my name of my item, who is the applicant that I want to use, what date was the application. Let's actually do loan type first, so I'm going to move loan type over here, and for application date, maybe I'm going to change the properties on that, make that 125 pixels, and then adjust it from there. So this is where I can just kind of baseline set this information up and define what I want this to look like inside. Now from here, I can also go in, and if I want to sort things, I can click on Configure Sorting, and it gives me the ability to define how I want to sort this information, and basically I can do up to 2 levels from a sort perspective. Also, I can go into filter criteria, and if I wanted to pre-filter this based upon different situations, I could define the filter criteria. So in this case, would make sense for a lookup scenario. I only want to look up loan applications that are active, so my filter status would be set to active. So then I would basically define each one of these options as I move through, and then once I'm done, I would hit save and close. And I would do this same situation for every single kind of view in the application. Now from a customization standpoint, it doesn't matter if it's a system view or a public view, the customization process is exactly the same. The views are all the same, it's all the same design element window, so you just have to go in and kind of set those up. The only one that's a little bit different is the quick find view. And so I'm going to open that up here real quick. And the big thing that you're going to notice that's different from a quick find scenario is right here. There's an add view columns and there's an add find columns. If I click on add view columns, this is what I'm used to seeing within a view itself. So I could select the applicant, I could select the application date, I could select the loan amount, loan type, and owner. And then I could click on OK. I could customize this as needed, so I'll go into properties, make that 200, remove. Now, the major difference here, as I customize this, is this add find columns. So this would be if somebody is on that entity and they want to find a specific loan application, what fields are we actually going to be searching for when they enter that information in? And so this is where I could define, okay, I want to search the city field because maybe I want to be able to search for loan applicant by city. Maybe I want to be able to search by loan amount. It all kind of depends on what we want to do. In this case, we'll just say name and city. As you add these search columns, then this is what's ultimately going to create those indexes inside the SQL database that will be used to actually look through and search for this information. So it's really the same concept. The only difference is with the quick find, you actually have to go in and not only add the view columns that you want to present, but you would have to add the find columns as well. And then you could hit save and close. And then in essence, you could really do that and would want to do that for all of the system views that ship as part of the application, but then you'd also want to go in and make sure you do that for your active loan applications, your inactive ones, for any of the views associated with it. Now, the other thing that you can do with these views, like for these public views, is if you have a view that you want to be kind of the default view, you can set that as default, and you'll see here that the active loan applications is default. This way, if users have not set their own default view, this will already be predefined and ready to use within the application. At some point, you're going to probably want to create some custom views for either existing entities or entities that you have created inside the system itself. And that can very easily be done. You can either create a new custom view from scratch, or you can take an existing view and copy it by clicking Save As. Now, remember that once you have these items put together as far as public views go, when you open it up inside CRM, it'll actually group them together as system views, even though they're technically considered public views. So that just kind of goes back to what I talked about before. Don't confuse special views with system views. Remember, those are the true system views are going to be things like your advanced find, quick find, those kind of situations. Your custom views will always display in alphabetical order. So the other thing to remember is there is no concept of being able to remove public views from only certain people. Once you create it as a custom view in the application, everybody who has access to that entity will see it. So you do want to try to make sure that as you're naming these, maybe use numbers, use alphabetical order, try to get the stuff that's going to be used most frequently near the top of the list to make sure that people aren't necessarily going to have to scroll through a bunch of different situations. And then the other thing is, you can remove columns that are implied by filters. So if you have a situation where you're filtering by state, you wouldn't necessarily have to have the state column in your view because you know that you're filtering it by specific state situations. So just when you're designing these views, take a little bit of time to really think about what you're doing in those situations to determine if it's ultimately going to, be extra work to add something else within there. The other thing is you can remove or deactivate views as needed. A couple of things to remember is, a system view like your advanced find and those types of situations, those cannot be deactivated. They have to be a part of the application. So remember that if you have public views that you're not working with or you don't want to use, you certainly can deactivate them, but just consider all the areas where they might be used to make sure that they're not populating onto a dashboard or a chart or something like that now you're going to have errors by deactivating that. And then the other thing is you certainly could delete a view permanently. You cannot delete system views or public views that were generated by the system. So again, when you create a new entity, it's going to create kind of that my active whatever and my inactive whatever. Those options cannot be deleted, but any ones that you create on your own, you certainly could delete. Just make sure that you're going in and checking for dependencies before you delete them to make sure that you're not going to break any other situation as you're going through, particularly around dashboards and charts. So in this case, I have a view called active loan applications, and maybe I want to create a system view for people to see their active loan applications. So I could go into active loan applications. I could then at this point in time go in and edit it. So open it up at this point. There is a save as option. So I could come in here and do save as. And I'm going to call this my active loan applications. And then once I save it as my active loan applications, now I could adjust it. So you'll see that the nice thing about the way I created it is all the columns are already there. So now all I would have to do is really go into edit my filter criteria, modify my filter criteria and say, okay, if the status equals active and the owner equals current user. So now when I click on OK, now I actually will filter out only the loan applications that I am the owner of that have a status of active. Now I could save and close this, and then once I publish this information out, this view would now show up inside the application and would be available for somebody to select anytime they actually go in and work with the loan application scenario. So we'll give this just a second to publish out the customizations. While that's publishing, I'll go back into my sales and loan applications. I can see that the view has now been adjusted based upon those individual situations. Now if I were to go out at this point in time and click on my down arrow, now I can see the My Active Loan applications. That's that system views thing that I was telling you about. So these are, when it says system views, it's really referring to public views, not the advanced find items. But this is now how you'd start to tailor this and tailor the views to fit your specific needs. The next piece to this, after you get kind of your views dialed in, is what types of visualizations do you want to bring into the application? Now, there's a lot of options around visualizations, when you start talking about, even bringing like Power BI and some of those things into a Dynamics 365 implementation. For today's purposes and for course purposes, we're really going to look at what are some of the visualization and chart capabilities built into Dynamics 365 from an application standpoint. And so when you start talking about charts, you were talking about, funnel charts, bar charts, some of those types of different situations that you would be working with. And these charts are really going to be more targeted at the entities that you're working through. So you can create two different types of charts. You can create charts that are more targeted at an organization type situation, or you can create more personal based charts. And you're really then at that point in time going to have kind of your series and category field information to group and aggregate the information accordingly. The other option that we'd be talking about from a visualization standpoint would be dashboards. And dashboards would be taking a series of things such as maybe a couple of different charts and a couple of different views and maybe some web resources and iframes, and really combining them into one view that's going to be displayed for agents as they're working through it. And we're going to take a little bit of time and examine kind of each one of those in a little bit more detail. Now, from a charts perspective, there's two different types of charts that you can create inside Dynamics 365. There's the system charts and there's the personal charts. The system charts are created at an entity level. So that's just like when we went in and created the views earlier. We would go into the entity that we want to work with. We would create the chart that's associated with that item and then work with the information from there. Personal charts are actually done on a user by user basis. They would go into a specific entity that has charts associated with it. They would expand the charts area and then create a new chart based upon those options. Now, the difference when you start talking about system versus personal charts is really who can access them. When you're talking about a system chart is created by somebody who has customization capabilities. A system chart is available to be included in a solution because it's part of an entity customization. So when I package those solutions together, that chart will come in there. The nice thing about a system chart is if I'm going to use dashboards or anything like that, I can use system charts in both personal and system dashboards. And everybody in the system who has access to that entity is going to be able to use that chart. So there's no concept of security around the system chart scenarios. And then I can export and import those charts if needed into other environments. From a personal perspective, it's a view. So it's not necessarily something that I can include in solutions because it's targeted specifically at that user. I can use personal views and personal charts in personal dashboards, but because they're not available to everybody in the organization, I can't use them in system dashboards. I now have a little bit more control over who has access to these charts if it's a personal chart, because I can share them with specific users or teams inside the organization. And then just like anything, I can export those individual personal charts as needed as part of the system as well. Now, when you design a chart, you really need to kind of go in and decide, what entity you want to use to create that chart out of. And then you also have to decide how you want to summarize the information as a series. So how are you going to aggregate that information? Are you going to do a sum? Are you going to do a count? Part of that's going to depend upon the actual data that you're working with inside the application. And then you will go through and kind of decide how you're going to group that information. Are you going to group them based upon categories? How is that information going to be reflected inside the application? And then you have to kind of decide what chart type you want to use that will show that information in the clearest format as you're moving forward. And then we'll kind of walk you through, how to create that information when you're moving forward. There's different types of charts, and depending upon what it is that you're trying to work with, you can do, a standard column chart or a bar chart or an area chart, but at the same point, sometimes you might want to have combinations of charts working together that are aggregating two different pieces of information to really give you more of an overall picture into what's happening. So for example, if you want to have, two different types of charts together, and I'm working with a column chart, I can combine a column chart with all column charts, area charts, and line charts in the system. Same with column, area, line charts. Bar charts can really only be associated with other bar charts inside the application. And then when we start talking about pie and funnel charts, I don't really have the capabilities to add multiple tiers or combine those individual charts as part of the application. But I at least have the capabilities to work through some of those options when we're going through. And then as far as what are some of my different aggregate functions, part of those are going to depend upon the different types of data that you're trying to aggregate. But I do have, counting capabilities. We have average and minning and maxing capabilities. You really pick kind of the best option based upon what you want to do. So let's look at this from a chart customization standpoint. So I have loan applications, and these loan applications are going to have dollar amounts associated with them. They're going to have different loan types associated with them. So it would be conducive that I would potentially want to have a chart associated with my loan applications. So I'm going to go into charts, and I'm going to create a new chart. And I'm going to basically call this, call this sample loan apps. Now the first thing that you have to do is you have to pick kind of the view that you want to use for this chart. Now when we say the view that you want to use for this chart, it's really just for the previewing of the data inside the application. It's not, the chart itself is actually going to be reflected of that once you go into the app and publish it. It's going to be reflected based upon the view that you're using. So this is really only for the design principles. In this case, we'll just use active loan applications. And so then we'll decide what is the information I want to work with. Well, in this case, we're going to say I want to work with the loan amount, because that's the item that I want to bring in and aggregate, and I want to do a sum of the loan amount. Now, what is going to be my horizontal axis? Well, in this case, I want to do it based upon the loan type. So now it's going to do a preview of what those situations are so I can see specifically what's in the application based upon those items. Now, you'll also see that in here I can do kind of series data. This is where I could do, top 5, top 3. This is where I could define only the numeric amount of records that I wanted to work with. I could also do kind of bottom rules if I wanted to, only the bottom 3 or bottom 4. But this is going to allow me to see exactly how I want that data to be presented inside the app. And then if I want to change, to different types of situations, this is where I can pick different types of bar charts or different types of column charts based upon what it is that I specifically want to show. So you just kind of play with what that information is going to work. And if I wanted to do multiple series, this is where I could add additional series to bring some of that information in and coordinate some of that information accordingly. But at this point, we'll just leave it kind of the way it is from a simplistic standpoint. So we'll go ahead and hit save and close. Now I'll go ahead and just for time purposes, I will publish all customizations. Now this was because we created this at an entity level. This is considered a system chart, which means this is also going to be able to be included as part of solutions and packaged out when we export the solution. So now if I were to go back into sales and loan applications, just to kind of reload this entity quick, and I go to charts, once this kind of populates up, here's my sample loan apps chart. So here's the chart that I've created. So now at this point, I would have the capabilities if I wanted to click on any one of these individual options, and it will drill down and filter the chart based upon what I've selected. If I click off of it again, now it brings it back to the standard view that we're working. As I switch the view to different items, my chart will reflect based upon the view that I've switched to. So this is how you would create kind of a system chart that would be available from an organization standpoint. The other option that you have in here is as you're going through these individual charts, you do have the capabilities if you want to go ahead and create your own chart. And if I create my own chart here, this would be a personal chart. So this would be a chart that would be only available to me and not to other users inside the organization unless I specifically shared that chart out with them. So these are the two options that you have around creating charts. Now, the other thing is if you have a personal chart that you would rather have be a system chart, the option that you would have is you can always export a chart and then import it into the system. And then that way you can kind of bypass the solution situations. And so when you take a personal chart, you can export it out as a personal chart, but then import it in as a system chart, which would give you some flexibility if somebody's created one that you don't necessarily want to recreate, but you'd like to have in the system. So as you start creating these different lists and these different views, one of the things that you're going to start to realize is your users will want to have a singular area to go in and access this stuff. And that's where dashboards come into play. I can take several things like charts and lists and iframes, web resources, and I can combine them into a singular view. Now, there's a lot of other elements depending upon if you're doing social engagement or Power BI that you can actually bring into these dashboards as well. But out of the box, you're really looking at grouping things like individual CRM charts, lists, iframes, and web resources. Now, what's nice with these is I can actually take these dashboards and I can create them from scratch, or if I already have an existing one, I can copy that existing one as a starting point and then use it in from that scenario. The nice thing with these dashboards is each one of these options can be kind of set as a default for a specific area through the actual sitemap itself. So if you go in and modify the sitemap, you can actually set the default area. But then these dashboards also have the capabilities to be used for tablet applications. And so all these dashboards can be made accessible via the Mocha client and the mobile application for users to use when they're using them. Now again, just like charts, there's two types of dashboards. There's this concept of system dashboards and personal dashboards. From a system perspective, they're pretty much exactly the same scenario. You have to be a system customizer. There's a specific area inside the application to do it. They can be included in a solution just like charts. They can use public views as well as system charts inside them. They can't use anything personal. The major difference between like dashboards and charts is access to dashboards can actually be controlled through security roles. So I can determine who has access to this dashboard based upon what security role is assigned to them. From a personal perspective, it's really very much the same thing as charts. They have to be created by a user. They can't be included in solutions. I can include either system or personal views as well as system or personal charts inside the dashboard. The only thing to remember is if I'm going to share that personal dashboard out with another user or team, all of the components that are involved in that also have to be shared. But both system and personal dashboards do have the ability to be available and made available on mobile, and we'll show you that inside the application. So when you start talking about dashboards and items, they're very similar in structure to a form. They have different tabs and items that are displayed inside them, and each component that's added into that dashboard can span multiple columns and multiple rows. Again, just like anything that we've worked with to this point, they do use responsive design. So as things are increased and adjusted and screen sizes changes, things will be adjusted accordingly inside the view to be able to work with that. And then your components will be adjusted up and down as sizes of information is handled and adjusted within there as well. And then you can move things around, and we'll show you that within the element and the design of the application. So when you want to create a new dashboard and you go in and actually create it, one of the first things you have to do is just kind of decide how you want to lay it out. And as you can see here on the screen, these are just some of the different layout options that are available. Really what it boils down to is when you're working with your dashboards can have basically 6 components maximum displayed in there. Now you can organize those 6 components however you want. You can set them up, you can have 4, you can have 5, you can display them whatever you want, but a maximum you can have 6. These design layouts are really just to get you kind of up to speed quickly based upon what it is that you want to do. Now, once you've created the dashboard, then it's going to give you the option to add things to the dashboard. And these are some of the different scenarios that you would see from a ability to add stuff. You've got the ability to add charts. So this is where if you have a chart that you have created, you can add it into the application. If you have a list, you can define the entity and the view that you want to use for the list, and it will populate that in. If you wanted to do like an iframe, like a link to Bing or something like that, you could use iframes. Web resources, we talked a little bit about if you have image files or if you have HTML files. And then other options that you would see would be like Delve integration. If you've turned Delve integration on from an application standpoint, you would see the ability to add those into dashboards. Social insights would be available if you have a connected subscription to social engagement. Power BI would be another one that you could be able to integrate with. These aren't necessarily out of the box functionality from a component standpoint, but they are available for you when you're creating these dashboards. So I'm back in my loan management solution, and now I want to add a dashboard. So what the difference with dashboards is, up until this point, most of what we've been doing has been kind of entity specific. Dashboards are not necessarily entity specific. So you'll see inside the solution components itself, about halfway down, there's a dashboards option. And so when I go ahead and click on dashboards, this will give me the ability to create my new dashboard. I can either, if I have existing dashboards in the system, I could obviously add them to this solution, or I could create a new dashboard from scratch. Now you'll notice that there's two options here. There's a new kind of dashboard and interactive experience dashboard. We'll talk more about interactive experience dashboards when we get into the next module, but for now, let's just go ahead and create just that standard dashboard. So I'm going to create my dashboard. These are those layouts that we talked about. And again, don't worry so much about, how this is more just to get things up and running. You can always adjust these accordingly based upon your needs. So in this case, maybe I'll just choose a 2-column regular dashboard. We'll call this sample dashboard. Now you'll see that down here I have, these are the different components that I can add to the dashboard. And because we don't have any other integrations configured, I really have your standard chart, list, web resource, iframe. So in this case, I want to go ahead and add a chart that is going to be linked to my loan application entity. So I'm going to switch this to loan application for my entity type that I want to work with. I'm going to default it to the active loan applications view, and I'm going to use the sample loan apps chart. Now I maybe want to have a list. So from my perspective, maybe I want to be able to go out and see all the current loan applications that I'm working on. So I'm going to click on list here, and I'm going to choose loan applications again. And I'm going to switch this to my active loan applications and then hit add. Now don't worry so much about, like, the chart, came in nice and pretty and it showed you everything from a chart, whereas the views come in with just kind of the columns grayed out. Don't worry so much about that. Once you actually push the view out or the dashboard out and people see it, it'll kind of self-correct. Now, the other thing that I can do is I could go into each one of these components, and as I go through and select them so I have kind of the blue outline, I could come over here and I can adjust these kind of accordingly too. So if I don't really need this to take up that much room, but I know that my loan applications view might want to take up a little bit more room, I could come over here to loan applications. I could now adjust that, make sure that's selected, increase the width, and now I can start sizing this accordingly. So from a presentation standpoint, it's going to come across very nice. Now in this case, okay, I've got my loan applications and my charts. You know what? Let's also add my active accounts. And I am going to make this kind of fill up the entire scenario here. So as I adjust this, you can see that it self-corrects the other option down on the bottom. And in this one, maybe I am going to just do an iframe. And again, just like we did earlier, I'm going to do bing.com and click on OK, and then adjust this accordingly. And now I will save and close my dashboard. Now, this would be available once we publish it. This will be available to push out into the application so users can work with it. But before we do that, we'll talk a little bit more about security here in just in the next section, so we can understand how to control access a little bit more. So for system dashboards, you do have the capability to make them visible or not visible to people based upon their security rules. By default, every dashboard that you're working with is going to have access to everybody. So when you create a system dashboard, everybody will be able to go in by default and work with it. But I can go in and I can actually limit those to specific security rules inside the application. And that's actually done through the customization interface within the solution. Now, the other thing to consider when you're talking about dashboards, and we'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about the mobility aspect of it, is whether or not they're going to be available on the mobile client. By default, dashboards will not be, but you do have the capabilities with both system dashboards as well as personal dashboards to be able to enable that functionality, so they could be visible and seen specifically on the mobile application as well. So if we go back to our sample dashboard that we created, so I'm in my loan management solution and I'm in dashboards, I can see my sample dashboard. So by default, if I click on it, there's an option here to enable security roles. And when I click on enable security roles, this will allow me to determine whether or not this is actually going to be available to other people or specific security roles in the app. Now you can see by default, everything is displayed for everyone. However, I could come in here and I could choose to display it only for specific security roles and then check or uncheck each security role as needed. Now in this case, I think just from a time perspective, we'll just leave it the way it is to display it for everybody. But this is where I could go in and kind of define that as needed. So now that I have my dashboard created and I have security set up and I've kind of defined who's going to have access to everything, now I could actually go ahead and publish it. Now I could publish all customizations, or the nice thing with dashboards is you can actually go in and just publish the individual dashboard itself. So now I can go ahead and hit publish. And then once I publish this, if I go back into the application, and I go back into dashboards for sales at this point, I can see my new dashboard will be one of the options that I can select from the drop-down menu. Now, again, by default, you can pick which dashboard is going to be kind of the default dashboard for the organization. But once that dashboard has been selected, then you can just pick whatever dashboard you want. So we'll give this just a sec to finish loading up. And then I'll go ahead and switch this. And now I'll see my sample dashboard be displayed in here. I click on sample dashboard, and now I have this dashboard available, and I can see all of the different options. The chart will display in here, the list that will associate it with the loan application entity will display in here, as well as the my active accounts. And then if I scroll down, there's that iframe that I added. So this is just a really easy way that you can customize things based upon what you might need to do. Now the other option here is I would have the capability, since this is a system dashboard, I could hit save as here, and then as an individual user create a personal copy of this dashboard and then edit this to fit my specific needs. But it really just depends upon what you're looking to accomplish based upon what your use case is. The final piece to the visualization story is theming. So theming was introduced a few versions back to really allow you to do some branding of the Dynamics 365 application based upon, maybe what your specific color scheme is or the color schemes of your customers. The big thing to remember with theming is it's not necessarily something that you're going to use to completely drastically alter the application from a visual context standpoint. Really what it's designed to do is to do very simplistic branding of your Dynamics 365 implementation. So maybe you want to add your company logo into the application. Maybe you want to go in and adjust what colors the navigation bar uses to match ones that are more closely resemble your organization. Maybe you want to use some of the entity-specific coloring options and those things. That's really what we're using here. So you're not doing drastic changes, you're just doing very minor visual changes inside the app. Now, a couple things to remember. Probably the biggest thing is when you are creating these themes are not solution components. Most everything that we've talked about to this point is a solution component, which basically means I can include it in a solution, package it up, zip it off, send it off to another environment, bring it in, and all that stuff will be there. Theming is really not one of those situations. So you will have to build the theme in each individual environment that you want to apply it to. The other thing is, if you're going to use things like logos and items within that theme itself, those items also have to be uploaded as web resources so you can access them through the theming interface. So you do need to make sure they're in the system, and then you can work with it from there. Adding and modifying a theme is pretty easy. It's really just done through the customizations area. So when you go into settings and then customizations, you'll see a theme option. And probably the easiest way is to just take whatever existing theme is already there and just copy it, alter it to whatever specific needs that you have, and then activate it within the system. The other thing is, even with kind of the new changes that are available within Dynamics 365, you're still looking at one theme kind of per organization that can be active within that environment. So you can't have multiple themes in different situations and just apply them as needed. It's one theme at an organization level. So if I come up and go into settings and customizations, one of the options I'll see in here is themes. So I can click on themes and it'll show me the default theme that we're currently using at this point. So when I go ahead and open up this default theme, I can see kind of the generalized color schemes that are available for it. I can see the navigation bar color, I can see the shelf color, and then I can see individual UI elements that are being used as part of this as well. So if I wanted to, I would have the capabilities to basically just clone this theme. I'm going to call this Derek's theme. Then I can come over here and I can define if I wanted to upload a logo or if I wanted to use a logo. These are some of the different logos that are currently uploaded as web resources. I'm not going to add a logo for today's purposes. Now I'm going to just modify my color. So in this case, I'll just maybe come down and find a color that might work. We'll just do it'll adjust that. Then I can go ahead and I can hit preview of my theme. Let me save it here real quick first, and then preview it. And now I can see what my environment would look like with that theme applied. Once I've defined that, okay, this is the theme that I want to use, I could then publish that theme and then make that the theme that I wanted to use for the existing environment as a whole. In this case, I don't necessarily want to use the theme, so I'll just exit preview mode at this point. It'll switch back to whatever the default theme is for the organization that I'm working with, and then I can go back from there. But this is just a very simplistic way that you can start adding some individual branding and just really tailor the environment to be your own. So in this module, we looked at all the different visualization options that you have from a Dynamics 365 standpoint. And that can include things like views, charts, dashboards, and even theming to a certain degree. So one thing to remember is that out of the box, Dynamics 365 ships with several different system views that support the application's built-in functionality. This would be things like your quick find view, your advanced find, as well as your lookup views. You can very easily go in and modify these views based upon whatever specific needs you might have for your organization. Now, the other thing to remember is as you're customizing this system, anytime that you create a new entity, you're also going to need to go in and modify the views that are created by default once you've gone in and actually added all of those custom fields. Because remember, those views are created automatically at the time the entity was originally created, so it's only going to have a few fields associated with it at that point. Now, the other thing to remember is depending upon what you're working with, whether it's a system entity or a custom entity, you always have the ability to go in and create additional views as needed based upon what you want to have displayed. If you're looking to really add kind of a visual pop to your environment, you can go in and add specific charts to provide different visualizations to allow users to not only view CRM data in kind of a chart format, but also interact with that. And remember that charts can be created at either a system level or a personal level by individual people when you're working through it. If you find that your users would like to have more of a singular type situation or a group of components together rather than having to navigate to different lists, you also could go in and define different dashboards for your organization. Now, like charts, dashboards can be created at a system level or at a personal level. The only nice thing about, or the really nice thing about creating charts or dashboards at a system level is that really allows you to associate them with specific security rules that would really limit who has access to those specific dashboards based upon who that user is at that point in time. Now, the other thing is, since each organization that you're working with will generally have corporate colors or items associated with it, Dynamics 365 now gives you the ability to go in and create kind of custom themes. And these themes allow you to modify things like the navigation colors and the colors for specific entities, as well as do things like add your own company logo to really brand it as far as your own. So by going in and using a combination of all these different elements, views, charts, dashboards, and even some of the custom themes, you can truly tailor the application to present your data in a way that's going to be unique to your specific organization requirements.